Hello and welcome to the CPA Australia podcast, your weekly source for accounting, education, career and leadership discussion.
In the Excel Yourself article for May 2021, I covered how Excel has changed over the last 10 odd years in terms of how formulas are developed and also some of the solutions that are now available in the current version of Excel. So the example I looked at had a table with project codes, and the project codes were reviewed or renewed every year, and there was a review date. And basically there was a status column, and the review date was the same date sort of every year, and what we wanted to identify was the next date that didn't have a status. So basically the status column was blank, and we wanted to find the next date or the lowest date that was applicable for a particular project. Now this is typically referred to as a MINIFS because there is a function in Excel 2019 that does exactly what we want. But unfortunately, you need Excel 2019 or later version to have that particular function. So what I wanted to do is just sort of take you through how these calculations were performed in older versions, and also how it is a little bit more flexible in the current version of Excel, in the subscription version. So back in the old days, we would use an array function. Now, array functions are typically an advanced topic in Excel, and to be honest, I'm not going to go through them in this podcast. If you want to see how they work and all of the intricacies of using them, then check out the companion video, which is on the INTHEBLACK website. You can also follow the link in the digital magazine. But the main thing with array formulas is when you're entering them, you have to hold the Control and the Shift key down and press Enter. So Control, Shift, Enter. It's often shortened to CSE as the way to display it. So if you don't do that, then the formula may display the wrong result. It doesn't always show an error, that's the problem with arrays. So with an array formula, if someone goes and edits that formula and doesn't then press, so even if they look at the formula and just click in the formula bar, but they don't press Control Shift Enter, if they just hit Enter, then that can break the formula. And so that's one of the reasons why people sort of avoid using array formulas, is that special entry. And what that entry does is it puts the braces, the curly brackets around the formula. And that means it is an array formula. So there was an array formula that would use a combination of the min function and the if function to figure out the lowest date that, in this case, had a blank cell in the status column, and also obviously picking up the correct project. Then in Excel 2010, we had the aggregate function. And we can hack that aggregate function because that had a superpower of it can ignore errors. And so the solution that I show in the video and mention in the article basically allows you to divide the date by the result of the two conditions. Now, when you multiply the conditions together, you can either end up with a 1, so if both conditions return true and you multiply them together, it's 1 times 1. True equals 1 and false equals 0, okay? It's binary. So true times true equals 1. So if you divide the date by 1, it's okay, it doesn't change. Oh, dates and numbers too, which is, if you watch the video, you'll see that. So each date in Excel has an underlying number. And so you can sort of do number calculations with dates. So you can subtract one date from another date to see how many days are between them. So when I divide the date column by this condition, it returns a number. But If one of the conditions is false, or either like any of the conditions are false, then that's 0 times something, and that always zeros it. And so you're dividing the date by a 0, and that's going to give you a divide by 0 error. Now, the superpower that aggregate has is it can ignore errors. And so what that does is basically you divide the date by these two conditions. The dates that are valid will divide by 1, and so those dates will get through. Any of the invalid dates will divide by 0, and they're ignored by the aggregate function. And so the aggregate function can use what's called the small function. So aggregate is a little bit like subtotal. You specify the function to use in the aggregate function. And in this case, we use small. Small is a function that allows you, it's like min, but min stands for minimum, by the way. The small function allows you to return the smallest number, so you would use a 1. If you use a 2 at the end of the small, you'll get the second smallest, and a 3 for the third, etc. So it's very flexible. So in this case, we want the smallest number, and the dates that are returned are only the dates that match the two criteria. If either of the criteria, so project code and a blank status, if either of those has a false, then obviously that creates the divide by 0 error, which is ignored by the aggregate, which leaves only the valid dates to look at. So that's 2010 onwards. Then in 2019, Excel has a MINIFS function. So this does exactly what we want. It's just like the SUMIFS. Basically, you specify the range you want to look in, and then you just specify the two criteria, and that's it. And it will return the lowest date. There's also a MAXIFS function as well. Now, in the latest version of Excel, the subscription version, the same formula that you have to use Control-Shift-Enter in all other versions, in the latest version, that will work without the Control-Shift-Enter. So it treats the formula like an array formula. It's called dynamic arrays. And it does the same calculation. Now, I wouldn't recommend doing it for this particular solution because we have the built-in MINIFS function. But the same structure that we used for the array can be used a lot more flexibly. And the example in the article and also the video is if we want to look up the account column, and the account columns had a prefix. So the accounts had a prefix, sorry. So there was an A and a B. Now maybe we want to find the next status when the account number starts with the letter A or starts with the letter B. And so we can use that same structure that we used for the array formula, we can use that in the dynamic array subscription version, and we don't have to worry about pressing Control-Shift-Enter. All we need to do is press Enter and it will work. And we can use the left function to figure out the what character the account number starts with. And we can use that within the if structure. And again, I don't want to go into too much detail about the structures here. It's much easier to watch the video. The latest version of Excel is so powerful and has, I said, a lot of abilities that the previous versions didn't have, or at least the previous versions had to use the Control-Shift-Enter to create the formulas. Microsoft is trying to push the subscription version. I don't know when the dynamic arrays will actually hit a full version. So a full version is like a version that you buy on a DVD or download. Yeah, I'm not sure when that's going to get updated, or even if there will be another version. They might just try to push everybody towards the subscription version. I don't know. So, okay. So I hope you found that useful. So how things have developed over the years. Also, Microsoft is fairly proactive in terms of listening to users, and so that's why we ended up with the MINIFS function, is that they've seen how users have been trying to calculate minimums based on conditions, and so the MINIFS function was created. There's also an average ifs function too, if you're interested, as well as the sum and also the count ifs. So there's quite a few now functions that have the condition basis for them, so you can have multiple conditions. Hope you found that useful. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to the CPA Australia podcast. For more information on today's episode, please visit the show notes at www.cpaaustralia.com.au/podcast. Never miss an episode by subscribing to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify or Stitcher.